When Holly arrived at work, everything seemed normal, at least until her boss, Evelyn Clark, appeared at the entrance with a serious but slightly uncomfortable expression. "Holly, come to my office. I need to talk to you," Evelyn said in a voice that left no room for discussion. Holly was intrigued. Evelyn was known for her relentless demeanor, but she rarely held private meetings without a professional reason. Holly followed Evelyn into the elegant office with large windows overlooking the city. "All right, what is it?" Holly asked, sitting down carefully. Evelyn closed the door before taking a deep breath, as if preparing to say something difficult. "I need to ask you a personal favor," Evelyn began, her hands clasped on the desk. "And, first of all, I want you to know that I'm willing to compensate you well." Holly frowned, surprised at the direction of the conversation. "A personal favor? What kind of favor?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It's about my daughter, Grace." Holly had heard of Grace. She knew Grace was younger, brilliant, but had gone through difficulties in recent years. Evelyn rarely mentioned her daughter, and that in itself said a lot. "She's going through a really rough time," Evelyn said, her voice lower than usual. "She's withdrawn from the world. She doesn't leave the house anymore, has no interest in anything. She's trapped in a sadness I can't reach." Holly felt a lump in her throat. Evelyn wasn't the kind of person to show vulnerability, and seeing that human side of her hit hard. "And where do I come into this?" Holly asked, trying to sound cautious. Evelyn looked directly at Holly. "I think she needs someone new in her life. Someone she can trust without the pressure of being judged. I want you to spend time with her. Keep her company, try to bring her back to life. Take her out, take her to places she used to enjoy." Holly blinked, incredulous. "You're asking me to be friends with your daughter?" "I'm asking you to help her," Evelyn corrected. "And yes, I know it's an unusual request. That's why I'm willing to pay you well for it." Holly's stomach churned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You want to pay me to spend time with your daughter?" "I know how it sounds," Evelyn replied with a sigh. "But I don't know what else to do. She doesn't accept help from anyone. I can't force her to go to therapy, but maybe she'll listen to you. And I want to compensate you for your time." Holly remained silent, processing everything. The idea was strange, almost surreal. She didn't know Grace had never exchanged a word with her, and going out with someone knowing it was part of a deal felt wrong. "Evelyn, I don't know," Holly began, fiddling with the hem of her coat. Evelyn interrupted her. "I know it's not easy to ask this, and I wouldn't expect you to do it without an incentive. I'll pay you $10,000 to start, and a bonus if it works." Holly's eyes widened. It was enough money to pay off her debts and still save a good amount. But the moral weight of the proposal made her hesitate. "This shouldn't be about money," Holly murmured, more to herself than to Evelyn. "But it is," Evelyn replied honestly, "because I know I'm asking for something personal. So, yes, I'm going to pay you, because it's the only way you'll agree." Holly took a deep breath and looked at Evelyn. She didn't know if she was making the right decision, but for some reason, Evelyn's words about Grace echoed within her. "All right," Holly said, with a mix of nervousness and determination. "I accept." Evelyn visibly relaxed, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you, Holly. This means more than you can imagine." The following weekend, Holly parked in front of the Clark's elegant house. She pressed the doorbell with a mix of anxiety and regret. Grace opened the door with a cautiously surprised expression. Her eyes, marked by exhaustion, were a deep brown. She wore a baggy sweatshirt and held a book with a crumpled cover. "Hi," Holly said with a somewhat nervous smile. "I'm Holly. I work with your mom." Grace raised an eyebrow. "And she sent you here because—" "Actually, I was in the neighborhood and thought, why not?" Holly improvised in a light tone. "I heard you like books. And coffee." Grace observed Holly for a few seconds before opening the door a little wider. "That was weird, but okay." Holly smiled, stepping inside carefully. The space was impeccably decorated, but there was a coldness in the house that contrasted with the warmth she wanted to convey. "Is there a favorite coffee spot around here?" Holly asked. Grace shrugged. "There's a place downtown. They make decent caramel coffee." "Perfect." My treat, Holly said, grabbing her car keys. Grace hesitated before following her. At the cafe, the conversation was initially slow, but Holly noticed that Grace had a sarcastic and intelligent sense of humor. When Holly made a silly comment about the cafe's tiny cups, Grace let out a short, genuine laugh. You're not like the people my mom usually sends, Grace remarked, stirring the straw in her iced drink. Holly almost choked but disguised it. Maybe because I wasn't sent. Grace narrowed her eyes, but didn't press the issue. The first meeting was a success. Little by little, Grace began to open up, and Holly, despite her hesitant start, realized she was enjoying Grace's company more than she ever imagined. The problem was that the secret was becoming heavier by the day. She knew that if Grace discovered the real reason she had appeared in her life, everything could fall apart. But at that moment, watching Grace smile as she talked about her favorite stories, Holly tried not to think about it. She just wanted to enjoy the present. The atmosphere of the cafe was cozy, filled with the aroma of ground coffee beans and a soft hum of conversations in the background. Grace sat with her legs crossed on the chair, slowly stirring her iced coffee with a straw, even though the ice had already melted. Holly noticed that she was physically present, but her mind seemed miles away. So, what's your favorite book? Holly tried to start a conversation, keeping her tone casual. Grace shrugged, without looking up. I don't know. Depends on the day. Holly's heart tightened. Depression was a silent presence, draining energy and painting everything gray. There were no easy answers. There were no manuals. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right approach. That's okay, Holly said softly. We can talk about something else. Why do you want to talk to me so badly? Grace finally raised her eyes, her dark gaze locked on Holly's with uncomfortable intensity. Did my mom send you or something? Holly felt a chill run down her spine but forced a smile. Your mom doesn't even know I'm here today, she lied. Grace narrowed her eyes suspiciously. She took a sip of her coffee, but her expression remained closed off. The silence stretched for a few minutes, and Holly began to wonder if this had been a mistake. Grace clearly wasn't ready to open up. Look, I know it must be weird having someone new show up like this, Holly began, trying to be as honest as possible without revealing too much. But I'm not here to force you into anything. You know, sometimes just having someone who listens helps. Grace let out a humorless laugh. That's what everyone says before they try to drag me into something I don't want. Then I won't drag you, Holly shot back, crossing her arms. But I'm also not leaving. Grace blinked, surprised at the direct response. You're pretty stubborn. So I've been told, Holly replied with a smile. The corner of Grace's mouth almost lifted, but she repressed the smile. Let's see how long you last. The following encounters were complicated. Holly showed up regularly, always suggesting small outings, a short walk, coffee, or even a quick visit to a bookstore. Grace always hesitated, and sometimes she said no so firmly that Holly had no choice but to accept it and leave. But she always came back. One rainy afternoon, Holly was sitting on the sofa in the Clarks' living room, trying to convince Grace to watch a movie with her. Grace was wrapped in a blanket, holding a book but not really reading it. All right, you pick the movie, Holly said, grabbing the remote and handing it to Grace. Nothing too depressing, please. Grace raised an eyebrow. Me? Choose? You're joking, right? I'm serious, Holly insisted. If this is going to be weird, at least let it be weird on your terms. Grace rolled her eyes, but took the remote. After a few minutes of searching, she selected an indie film with a melancholic tone and stunning cinematography. Well, at least there aren't any explosions, Holly joked. Grace didn't respond immediately, but her expression was a bit more relaxed. After the movie, the two sat in silence, listening to the sound of the rain outside. Suddenly, Grace spoke, almost absent-mindedly. You don't seem like someone my mom would send. Holly's throat tightened. There was that suspicion again. Maybe because I'm not, Holly said, trying to sound casual. Grace looked at her, her gaze serious. Then what are you? Holly hesitated. It wasn't the right time to tell the truth, but she also couldn't deflect with a joke. I'm just someone who knows how hard it is to deal with certain things. Grace watched her for a few more seconds before abruptly changing the subject. Why did you choose advertising? It seems so loud. Holly's heart slowed a little with the change in topic. She shrugged. Because I wanted to tell stories. To make people feel something. What about you? Why did you choose to study literature? Grace gave a bitter smile. Because it's the only world where I can breathe. That night, as Holly drove home, she felt a strange weight. She was getting closer to Grace, but she knew that this closeness was being built on a dangerous omission. Grace was beginning to trust her, and that made the secret feel like a ticking time bomb. At the same time, Holly realized that the affection she felt for Grace wasn't just empathy. She was falling in love. And that made everything even more complicated. Weeks passed like a slow, constant fog. Holly kept showing up, with care and persistence. Grace was still hard to read. Some days, she seemed lighter, while on others, she was completely shut off. But one thing was clear. Holly was becoming a presence Grace expected, even if she wouldn't admit it. One afternoon, as they sat on the grass at the local park, Holly offered Grace a piece of muffin, which she accepted, without complaint. The sun filtered softly through the trees, and there was something almost peaceful about the scene. Why do you keep coming back? Grace asked, staring at the piece of cake as though trying to decipher it. Because I want to, Holly replied, as she always did, but her voice was gentler. Grace shook her head, letting out a humorless laugh. No one does this for nothing, Holly. Maybe I'm not just anyone, Holly shot back, looking at Grace sincerely. Grace looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the silver ring she wore. She took a deep breath before saying something that made Holly freeze. You know, I think I like you. Not just as a friend. Holly's heart leapt so hard it felt impossible to hide. She stared at Grace, stunned. Grace looked vulnerable, her expression uncertain but determined. Grace, Holly began, trying to gather her thoughts. You don't have to say anything, Grace interrupted, looking away. I just wanted to be honest. Holly wanted to say she felt the same because it was true, but the words stuck in her throat, trapped by the weight of the secret she carried. That night, Holly couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her thoughts circling around Grace. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. The lie that had started as a plea for help was becoming impossible to maintain. But how could she tell the truth without destroying everything? The next day, Holly arrived at the Clark house and was greeted by Evelyn at the door. Her boss looked at her with concern. How is she? Evelyn asked in a low voice. Holly hesitated before answering. Better, I think. You've been incredible, Holly, Evelyn said with gratitude. I know this hasn't been easy. The praise didn't bring relief, only a tighter knot in Holly's chest. She trusts me, Holly murmured. And that's why I need to tell her the truth. Evelyn's smile vanished. No. Holly, you can't tell her. Not now. She deserves to know, Holly shot back, feeling her frustration rise to the surface. She thinks I came into her life by chance. And if she finds out, she might shut down again, Evelyn replied, crossing her arms. Do you want to throw all of this away? I don't want to lie to her, Holly said, her voice quieter but firm. Before Evelyn could respond, Grace's voice echoed from the hallway. What are you two whispering about? They both turned quickly. Grace stood with her arms crossed, a suspicious expression on her face. Nothing important, Holly said, trying to sound casual. We were talking about work. Grace frowned, but didn't push further. Sure. That afternoon, Holly took Grace to an outdoor cafe, hoping to lighten the mood. Grace seemed distant, stirring her juice with a straw, her gaze lost in thought. Is everything okay? Holly asked. Grace shrugged. I don't know. I just feel like something's wrong. Holly's heart pounded. The moment she had feared was closer than ever. Grace was too perceptive not to feel that something was off. Wrong house? Holly asked, trying to stay calm. Grace looked at her, her eyes tired but steady. You. Us. It's like you're hiding something. The silence that followed was suffocating. Holly knew she couldn't delay any longer. If she stayed quiet, Grace would lose all the trust they had built. Holly took a deep breath, feeling the words burn as they left her. Grace, there's something I need to tell you. Grace's gaze hardened, as if she already knew that what came next wouldn't be easy to hear. The cafe grew unnervingly quiet. The world around them seemed frozen as Holly tried to summon the strength to continue. Grace's eyes were filled with both expectation and suspicion, as though she was bracing for a blow. Holly felt her chest tighten. When I came into your life, it wasn't a coincidence, Holly began, her voice low but steady. Your mom asked me to spend time with you. Grace's expression shifted from confusion to shock in a matter of seconds. She blinked several times, trying to process what she'd just heard. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. She was desperate, Holly continued, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. She didn't know what else to do. She thought that if you met someone new, someone not directly tied to everything, it might help. Grace let out a dry, incredulous laugh, leaning back in her chair. So, all of this was planned? No, Holly replied quickly, leaning forward. I was paid to meet you, yes, but I never imagined I'd care about you this much. Grace, nothing about what we've shared has been a lie. Grace stood up, her eyes brimming with tears. You lied to me. She gripped the edge of the table as if to steady herself. You made me believe that this was real. It is real, Holly insisted, standing up as well. I never wanted to hurt you, Grace. I fell in love with you. The confession hung between them, but it didn't have the effect Holly had hoped for. Grace took a step back, shaking her head as if trying to block out the words. I need to get out of here, Grace murmured before rushing out of the cafe. Holly stood frozen, unable to move for a moment. When she finally did, she quickly paid the bill and ran outside, but Grace was already gone. The street felt emptier and colder without her. Back at the Clark house, Grace stormed in like a hurricane, ignoring the glances from the household staff. Evelyn was in the living room when she saw her daughter enter, tears streaming down her face. Grace, Evelyn started, her voice full of concern. Grace raised a hand to stop her. You sent her, didn't you? You paid someone to be my friend. Evelyn's expression crumbled with sadness. Grace, I just wanted to help. You think you can buy solutions? Grace shouted, her voice breaking. Am I just another problem for you to fix with money? No, Evelyn responded, tears filling her eyes. I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified of losing you. Grace's breathing was ragged, her eyes blazing with hurt. You lost me the day you thought you needed to deceive me to take care of me. She hurried up the stairs and slammed her bedroom door so hard the entire house seemed to shake. Evelyn collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The following days passed in a haze for Holly. She didn't know what to do except wait, even though she knew waiting wouldn't fix anything. The guilt was an unbearable weight, and all she wished was that she had done things differently. It was on the third night after the confrontation that her phone rang. She looked at the screen and saw Evelyn's name. Her heart clenched as she answered. Holly. Evelyn's voice was tired, almost devoid of strength. I don't know what to do. She still won't speak to you? Holly asked, though she already knew the answer. No. And she won't leave her room, Evelyn sighed. I messed up with her, and now I don't know how to make it right. Holly was silent for a moment before responding. Can I try to talk to her? Evelyn hesitated, but knew deep down that Holly was the only person who might be able to reach Grace. Come tomorrow. The next day, Holly stood in front of Grace's bedroom door. She took a deep breath before knocking lightly. There was no response. Grace, it's me, Holly said, resting her forehead against the door. I know you don't want to hear me. I get it. But I need to say a few things. The silence was heavy, but Holly pressed on. I messed up. I should have told you from the beginning, but I was scared. Because I didn't want you to think everything was fake. Because it wasn't. Her voice trembled. You made me see life in a way I never had before. And I fell in love with who you are. Not because your mom asked me to, not because of any money, but because you're incredible, even if you don't believe that. Still no response. Holly sighed and placed a folded note in front of the door before walking away. The next morning, when Holly woke up, her phone buzzed. A message from a familiar number. "Can we meet today?" At the park. Holly's heart pounded. At the park, Grace was sitting on the same bench where they had shared so many conversations. She looked tired, but there was something different in her expression, a vulnerability that carried not just pain, but also hope. Holly approached slowly and sat beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Only the sound of leaves rustling in the wind filled the space. "I read your note," Grace finally said. "And?" Holly asked, unsure of what to expect. Grace took a deep breath before replying, "I'm still hurt, but part of me believes you. Part of me wants to believe you." Holly looked at Grace, her eyes glistening with tears. "Then let me try to make this right." Grace gave a faint smile, a small, but genuine one. "You don't need to fix anything. Just be honest with me." "I promise," Holly said, gently taking Grace's hand. "Always." Grace squeezed her hand, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like a new beginning. The park was quiet, except for the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. Holly and Grace sat side by side for a while, unhurried, as if they both needed that silence to remember how to breathe. "You have no idea how much I wanted to hate you," Grace began, her voice low but steady. "When I found out the truth, it felt like the ground had disappeared." Holly gently squeezed Grace's hand, afraid to let go. "I know. I have no excuse. What I did was wrong, but everything I feel for you is real." Grace turned to look at Holly, her eyes tired but no longer distant. "I believe you, but this won't be easy." "It doesn't have to be," Holly replied with a soft smile. "It just has to be real." Grace took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel that moment of vulnerability. "You were the first person who made me feel seen. Like I wasn't just a problem to be fixed." Holly shifted on the bench, fully turning to face Grace. "Because you never were. No matter what your mom or the world tries to tell you, you're not a problem. You're incredible." Grace let out a brief, shy laugh, but there was something genuine in it. She looked at the trees around them before replying, "I'm still scared." "Me too," Holly admitted. "But I think it's worth it." Grace looked down at their intertwined fingers and smiled faintly. "I think so too." Days later, the reunion with Evelyn wasn't easy, but Grace was ready to listen. When Evelyn opened the front door and saw Grace and Holly standing together, a mix of relief and nervousness spread across her face. I don't even know what to say," Evelyn began, her eyes brimming with tears. "Then don't say anything," Grace replied softly. "Let's start over." Slowly. Evelyn nodded, emotional. She stepped closer hesitantly and placed a hand on Grace's shoulder as if needing to confirm that the moment was real. "I just wanted you back." Grace gave a small smile. "I never left. I was just lost." Months later, life didn't return to normal all at once, but the changes were visible. Grace started leaving the house more often, gradually resuming her routine. She returned to visiting bookstores, parks, and cafes, but now, Holly was always by her side. The two no longer hid their relationship. It was built on honesty, shared laughter, and small moments of care. Grace still had difficult days, but Holly never let her face them alone. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, Grace took Holly's arm, stopping suddenly. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Grace said, her eyes full of a sweetness Holly would never forget. Holly smiled and cupped Grace's face tenderly. "You made me believe that not giving up is the easiest thing in the world." Grace laughed, a sparkle in her eyes that had seemed impossible months earlier. "I love you, Holly." Holly felt her heart completely warm. "I love you too." The kiss that followed was calm, like a silent promise that no matter what came their way, they would find a way through it, together.